So, let's talk. How do you pronounce that? Antowuk?
I was going to ask you the same question.
I believe it's like Antowuk.
I think I'll go with Antowuk.
Yeah, Antowuk Horror. The Antowuk Horror. Dun dun dun.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
This is GammaCast, and I am Dave. Online, I have got co-host Charlie.
Hello.
Today, we are going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 2, The Antowuk Horror, as Charlie just put it. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes.
So, director Sigmund Newfield Jr., writer is Nicholas Correa. Original air date was September 29th, 1978. Alias, we got David Barton. Location is Utah.
Yes.
Synopsis: when a rampaging Hulk tears his way through a dying resort town, the residents of the community attempt to attract more media attention by staging the appearance of a fake creature. Unfortunately, the move also attracts a hunter interest in killing both monsters. And as a co-star of the episode, a gentleman named William Lucking. He played Harlan Bates. Something that I know William Lucking from was I was a big fan of the show Sons of Anarchy, and he played a character named Piney from that series.
No. Which character was that? Was that the
He's one of he was one of the original 8.
No. From the show.
From the
are we discussing the? Is that the hunter or the shop owner or
the shop owner?
Okay.
The father kind of had an attitude about him.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of struck me as a bit Reb Brownie.
This episode, I don't know, it wasn't that overly exciting to me. There were some good moments with Bill Bixby acting with the little girl Samantha. So I thought there was some good tender moments there. There was definitely some Jack McGee moments in there where we had him kind of working with the hunter, but not really working with the hunter. But he was kind of there, and at the same time, you kind of got the side of Jack McGee where he was concerned with not necessarily getting the Hulk killed, but just capturing him. So I thought that was a good character development moment. But as far as the episode itself, I got to go back on a previous argument that I've used in the past where I didn't have a lot of things that happened that really needed a Hulk in here. So was kind of my issue.
Okay, so I'm gonna be very disagreeing with you on this.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no. Look, okay, and part of this is nostalgia. This is one of these episodes that really stuck in my mind as a young boy, as a young Bigfoot aficionado back in the when I was a young man, and I was interested in Bigfoot the way that my current son is interested in zombies. This was one of these episodes that really stuck out at me, both for the fact that you get this sort of faked Hulk creature, this big Hulk, this green Bigfoot character, the Antowuk Horror, as he is dubbed. So that always struck me as nice. And as an adult watching it, one of the things that kind of strikes me in this is that there's a lot of great character we get in this episode.
Yes.
Both for David Banner as well as Jack McGee. So First off, just to give you a bit of the story here, we're opening up with Jack McGee in the woods after a recent Hulk sighting. And you can see where the Hulk pushed down a tree. This is another one of these situations where we know something happened with the Hulk. He probably fought a bear recently, and Jack McGee is the Hulk and bears. They have history.
They do.
Might have been that same bear. He's been after him.
Yeah,
I want my rematch.
He's holding a grudge.
Yes. Anyway, so you see Jack McGee there, and he's examining the pushdown tree, and we get this big game hunter who comes in, who is clearly hard on his luck. He's like not had a big story, and you get this history between him and Jack McGee, that him and Jack McGee clearly had some kind of history where there's been things this guy has hunted that was worthy of a National Register story. Now, I'm not sure what that was. I'm not sure if Jack McGee went into the veldt to hunt big game with this guy, or if they were after the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot together. But whatever they did something that was clearly important to this guy, because he got on a lecture circuit. He probably had like a book published about his adventures, and Jack McGee was a part of that. But obviously, the fickle finger of fate has turned away from this man, and now he's on the outs. And Jack McGee, he likes the guy, and the guy wants to do it, but the guy sees that his goal is to kill the Hulk, and of course Jack McGee wants to know the truth of the Hulk. Which is a very interesting thing to take on this. When you look at the actual comic book Hulk mythos, there is very much this idea of the General Ross character, who is the guy always pursuing the Hulk, and the General Ross character being largely antagonistic to the Hulk, to the point where he doesn't care about necessarily capturing the Hulk. I mean, he does wind up capturing the Hulk and wants to capture the Hulk, but it seems more often than not it's just because they can't figure out how to kill the Hulk. But here we have the guy in the General Ross role. Those of you who've seen the recent Civil War film got to see General Ross as Secretary Ross, although they completely gloss over his bad history with the Hulk there. And Jack McGee's in this role, but he is much more, I would say, ideologically pure in this, in the fact that, yes, he just wants to know the mystery of the Hulk. He doesn't necessarily want to kill the Hulk. It's not that he even though he sees the Hulk as a danger, he also sees the Hulk as something that needs to be solved, not something that needs to be destroyed. So that was nice. Now, what I also like about this is that, again, and I had mentioned this at the end of the last episode, and it's not quite the case that I presented then, but it does seem to be something, which is that when we come across Banner in this, he's not, he just had a Hulk out not too long ago. Jack McGee is around the area, but Bruce Banner doesn't seem afraid. And I guess we can chalk that up to this idea that, there are a bunch of little towns around here, and exactly where the Hulk might be, it's still open, and Jack McGee hasn't gotten to this town yet, so David's had the time to set himself up here. And what I liked about this, because we are watching this in the order we're watching it, even though I don't know how much continuity the writers really put in here from episode to episode, seeing David in this role, trying to parent this young kid after the events of Married, really kind of spoke to me about where David's head is at. That David, he sees this kid who he probably who's this little girl with this scientific bent, who probably thinks that, if me and Caroline had a child, she might have been something like this. And so that to me really spoke to me. Now, of course, we also get that this causes the antagonism with her father, who of course isn't the science guy that the daughter is, that we can maybe assume her mother was, or whoever her mother was, it was just a different situation. And this causes anger, jealousy, and rage from the father. And we also get a great call out here against Banner in this idea that people do see through him. They know that he's on the run from something, because of course he is clearly an educated man. and what exactly brought this educated man to basically be begging for a job town to town is the question. Is he, what is he on the run for the law? Does he have some sort of problem? What exactly is it? Now, all that said, people are still fairly trusting with this man. A man who clearly has some history, but people are still fairly trusting for him. So to that extent, it's a good thing for Banner. But
And I don't disagree with anything that you've said, but I
mhm,
guess the reason why I have issue with the episode was because the only reason why this became a Hulk episode was because of what David's interaction with the story. So if David didn't exist in that story, they wouldn't have had this horror situation. They wouldn't have had a situation where he would have been bullied in the storeroom by his boss and then
mhm,
have to Hulk out. And then the first time the townspeople see this horror thing, which they dubbed after the Amityville horror, I assume,
mhm,
and then it becomes the mythos and this way that they're going to drum up more tourist stuff. So it's not that disagreeing with your points, and I see the evolution of the character. You're right, and I see what Jack McGee is trying to do, where he doesn't want the Hulk killed. So I agree with all that. And like I said at the beginning, what Bill Bixby brings for his acting into this role shows, what, the characterization with the child. So I agree
mhm.
with all that. And I don't hate that part of it. I just hate the part that, because he was in there in this storeroom, there wasn't really something that I think warranted needing a Hulk. It's something that just needed somebody that was going to not be, that was getting tired of being antagonized by his boss. And that's what caused, I mean, that's essentially what the catalyst that's kicked off everything. And
But when
it's kind of lame.
Yeah, but of course one can argue that is one of the aspects of the Hulk's existence. I mean, really none of these stories need a Hulk. All of these stories get a Hulk. Half the time, having the Hulk there is as much the cause of the problems as it is the solution. You know, and what I find interesting in this is just this idea that as we as the Hulk shows up, you know, well, and what's fascinating is how quick on his feet the father is on this idea. This thing shows up, this thing tears through his shop, but he's immediately seeing the dollar signs of it. He realizes how this can be a good thing, and that's an interesting take on it. Exactly, for what it's worth, obviously he sees himself as not very intelligent because he's not excessively book smart, but given how quickly he comes to this idea, how quickly they formulate the plan, how quickly they set up everything so that they can do the feat of strength with the fake Hulk attack, it's actually pretty impressive, and so I do
And
think that he
this guy does have talents of his own because he's able to convince the mayor and the sheriff to just go
Mhm.
right along with this whole, you know,
Yeah.
scheme.
Well, exactly, and that's exactly it. And of course, what I like about this is we do get this really great, which we're gonna have a a bit of a sadness in the next episode. But this episode, we get a really good Jack McGee thing. I think sometimes we get a good Jack McGee episode, and then we get a bad Jack McGee episode, or even a no Jack McGee episode.
Right.
And I really thought that this was a really good Jack McGee episode. You always say that what you like to see is you like to see him working on the Cure and Jack McGee.
Right.
And this one, we don't get it much to the Cure. And I'm, like for me, I'm never as worried about him finding the cure because, for what it's worth, I know he's not going to find a cure. The entire premise of the show is that he can't control the raging beast that dwells within him.
But I just like to see the effort.
Well, yeah. But of
Right.
course,
I know the end result.
you know, you also have the real aspect in the scientific reality of it is he has to try and find what the next thing will be. And it's like, if he's just going, well, let's try this, let's try this, let's try that, there has to be some honest assessment of what's out there. Because it was essentially, if every episode he was trying to cure himself, eventually it's going to be like, well, gee, why doesn't he go back to that one thing that almost worked that one time, And it's like, it's, if you're going to have him always in this trial and error, you're going to have times when he is not in that ability to find a way to cure himself. But, we're
But
basically,
we already know that time has passed. It's already been, whatever it was, 3 weeks, from this previous Hulk sighting that got Jack McGee out there in the first place, and then now he's just helping take care of a shop. So the evolution of time, it's already been 3 weeks to a month now,
yeah.
where we can assume no activities happened with him trying to cure
Yeah.
himself.
But to that end, again, like I said, and like I said, I don't know if you can really read into the programming schedule, because obviously these things may not have aired in order, and more to the point, the writers might not have even been operating on that idea at that time. But to me, the fact that he goes from this episode where there was this strong child character that symbolized a future, this strong emotion he had with this woman, and then here he is with this young girl, you really get this idea that this is, to me, it makes sense why he's staying. To me, it makes sense because here he sees a future in a left-handed way that he dreamed he might have been able to have with Dr. Carolyn in Hawaii, and now he has found it here in Utah. He's found that thing he was looking for.
Right.
And in that level, that speaks to me in a very nice way. Watching the two episodes, as an example, if we were watching in random order, if I had just turned on Me TV and I was seeing this, I might have the same complaints you have. But seeing them in order, seeing how they're progressing in this way, and seeing what is kind of seems to be the story they're telling, to me, that's kind of the interesting point of it. That's kind of what makes this a viable story, is that it does have this continuity between the episodes, and I like that, and I think that is a real strength for this episode.
All right, so I think we need to move the story along where we have him, the fake beast, rages through the town, and it's at a some sort of festival going on, and then he goes out and causes havoc. And this is I want to say a very weak Lon Chaney kind of Wolfman kind of look.
Yeah, but again, to me, this is like the strongest selling point of it, is how they did do the fake Hulk, and they do tip over the truck, and they do set this whole thing up to present it. And yeah, it shows you how quickly this town is ready to fleece the rubes. It's
Right.
like within 10 minutes of declaring a monster, they have the carnival there. They got everyone there. It's like, it's called Ace in the Hole, I think is the name about the miners who are trapped. And it's an old Frank Capra film, I believe. Very dark and disturbing, sad one. But, it is a great take on it. And when they do the fake Hulk, and then of course you have Banner there essentially seeing a Hulk attack, as it were, although of course he of course sees through it right away, but how quickly everyone else wants to embrace it is kind of very fascinating to me.
Right. And then next thing you know, his the shopkeeper's buddy comes back and says, oh, the other beast got his friend. And so then a group of reporters all decide that they want to go up to the mountain to get proof of this other creature. And then, of course, David goes up to stop. I believe his name's Harlan.
Yeah.
About let's stop all this madness and all this craziness. And then at that time, the Harlan decides that he doesn't want David to get involved at all to ruin what is becoming the spectacle that he set up. And then we have our next Hulk out moment because he's trying to subdue David or get David away so that he can continue the act.
Yeah.
And then we actually have a situation where he's got this boulder rigged up at the top of the mountain, and the compressed air is supposed to, be used to make it look like this fake character is pushing the boulder down the hill or down the mountain. But this time, it actually goes right up against the Hulk. The Hulk doesn't even flinch. All he does is he just hits it and then breaks it like in half. So that was really kind of that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was great. And of course what we get, I liked how they really tied it up in this because of course, you get the Hunter coming after the Hulk, you get everyone seeing the two Hulks. And when the Hulk does, throw Harlan out and everyone goes, oh, it was all a ruse, it was all a hoax. And they were like, he's a hoax, but what about that other Hulk we saw, which also gives you that great, National Register kind of what exactly are we looking at here kind of a thing where, if you want to say it was all a hoax, you now have evidence it was all a hoax. But everyone there also saw that there was a real Hulk there, that there was a Hulk to be seen, and of course you get the happy ending for the old guy, like, oh, let's interview the Hunter who was face to face with the Hulk, and then of course Jack goes, that is an employee of the National Register.
Well, but even before we get there, you have the moment where the little girl needs to be saved.
Yeah.
And so she's there. She sees her dad dressed up as this fake horror. And something happens where she slips and then she's on this limb off the side of the mountain, and where the Hulk actually has to work with her dad in order to save her. So that was really kind of a fun moment where the Hulk knew at that time, I don't have to rage anymore. I've got to help. And then at the same time gets shot in the shoulder.
Yeah. Well, that's always like we say. I mean, when the Hulk gets to have a moment, when they let Lou Ferrigno have a moment and a scene, it's actually always pretty good.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know why they were so afraid of Lou Ferrigno as an actor in this series. I really think that he does show some real skill for what they asked him to do. And, I think they really probably could have thrown in a couple Hulk smashes every now and again, and maybe even thrown in a Betty. And I think, Lou Ferrigno would have been more than capable of living up to that without difficulty. But, we do see that, and we do see a nice thing there. And of course, we do see that the Hulk, does save the day, and the Hulk is always a force of nature, and that's something that goes, back to the comic books and how they're going to present the Hulk, that he is this force of nature. You can't control the Hulk, but the Hulk does come through, and whether or not it winds up being a positive or a negative has a lot to do with how everyone approaches the situation, and here, the Antowuk Horror is going to be this nice little tourist trap for this town for years to come, because there's just enough evidence to make everyone go, oh, there is a Hulk, and he lives here. Now, of course, obviously, anyone who's following the real Hulk, they're going to know, well, no, the Hulk moves around because we follow what the story says in the National Register. But for Antowuk, they're gonna make their bones on this. And of course, the old guy is going to get back on the lecture circuit because of this. It's actually a little bit disappointing that he doesn't keep on trying after the Hulk. I think that might have even been when we talk about our Jack McGee Files comic book, I think having the old Hunter and Jack McGee working together, trying to track where the Hulk might go next, would be a very interesting bit of story there. Maybe having them meet up again in later episodes, that would be cool. But
yeah, that the Hunter's name is Buck.
Yeah, Buck the Hunter, not Craven, unfortunately.
Oh, that would have been cool. I hear what you're saying, and I think you're giving, a lot of credit to it. And a lot of the points that you're making, I don't disagree with, but at the same time, I feel that, as I said earlier, there just wasn't a reason for there to be an Incredible Hulk for this one, other than the situation that he created by being there. And you make a valid argument because, you're right that there's a lot of those situations where because he's in the story, it creates this extra layer of drama that needs a Hulk to resolve it,
Hmm.
but it's created because he's there.
Yeah,
And
but it's like, to go back to the trucker episode, which we love.
right.
You know, what do you literally don't need a Hulk in that at all. The Hulk is extra superfluous in that episode, but it's still one of the best episodes they've done. So I guess my take on it would be that worrying too much about the purpose of a Hulk maybe misses the larger point of the Hulk. The Hulk doesn't need a purpose. The Hulk just needs to be Hulk.
Well, there's a big bunch of bad guys that need to be beat up in the trucker episode. This one, there was essentially one guy and a boulder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, I guess I would say there's only two bad guys in the Hulk, and mostly the Cliff does most of the work.
Right.
And of course, if Banner hadn't showed up, then they wouldn't have. Even if they had just came up with the idea to manufacture an Antowuk Horror on their own without a Hulk impetus, they wouldn't have needed they wouldn't have needed the Hulk without the Hulk being there to cause problems. So it is a snake who eats its own tail.
But I can see where you're going with it, though. That the future of this town, that's going to be the tourist trap, right? They're going to be selling
Hmm.
the Antowuk horror T-shirts and the bobbleheads, and every so often somebody's going to go out and put those footprints,
Hmm.
out, and tell all the wives' tales that'll last for generations,
Oh
and
yeah.
every so often somebody will claim, oh, I saw this, this thing, in the woods or whatever, and then that'll help keep the mystery going, even though David Banner's going to be long gone.
Well, exactly.
Right.
And if anyone needs to, they still have the suit. You know?
The very bad looking suit.
Yeah. Well, it's good enough for the likes of them, is what we'll say.
Right. Okay, so do you have final thoughts on the episode?
Well, I guess my final thought is that I was very happy in the way that Banner was portrayed. I was very happy in the way that he grew as a character. I don't know if that growth is going to be sustained. I know that when we get to the next episode, I'm much less forgiving, but it was a really good entry in the piece. And like I said, for me, this is one of those episodes that stuck with me when I was a kid watching it. If for no other reason than we actually get a counter monster in it. We get another. We get another Hulk, even though it's not a real Hulk. We get sort of this image of a Hulk, and I think that kind of feeds into the Hulk mythos nicely.
Yeah, and I'm not as big of a fan of it, obviously, as you are, but I still, I enjoy the merits that it has in it, and that's why we got to see that side of Jack McGee where he doesn't want to kill the Hulk, he just wants to understand it, capture the Hulk.
Hmm.
So I like that aspect of it. I like, the idea that this Buck the Hunter guy, that was kind of fun having that in there. And at the beginning was like, no, you don't. We're not really in business together. Let's not even be involved. But then at the end, he's like, no, no, he's an employee. I love
Hmm.
that. That was really funny. What I didn't like was, what I've already explained was just where it felt like it was kind of a forced shoehorn situation of getting the Hulk involved. And I don't know. It didn't appeal to me as much as other episodes in the past had. Not a horrible episode. We've definitely had much worse episodes. Um,
Yes, we have.
So I'm not giving it that. I'm not saying this is a horrible episode, but it's enjoyable, but just
Yeah.
barely enjoyable for me.
Yes, it's no 747.
Exactly. It's no fighter episode. The final round.
Final round.
Yep. All right. So, what are your social media credentials, Charlie?
Well, if you'd like to tweet along with me, when I watch the Hulk reruns on MeTV on Saturdays at 7 o'clock Eastern, although I have missed the last couple of weeks because of many, many things, but you can tweet along with me at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And of course, you can write to me if you want to talk Hulk or talk Marvel Comics or talk really anything from philosophy to physics. Feel free to do so at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. And of course, listen to my other podcasts, the All New Marvel Roundup and Super Connectivity on the Nuff Said feed at Southgate Media.
All right, and I am Dave. I take care of our 80s Reboot Overdrive social media accounts. So on Tumblr, that'd be 80sreboot.tumblr.com. Email is 80sreboot@gmail.com. We have a blog, and that's southgatemediagroup.com/80srebootblog. Twitter, that's at 80sreboot. And I'm forgetting one. Facebook, facebook.com/80sreboot. So the other thing I also wanted to do is I wanted to take a quick moment and do a little shout out to another one of the series that we have on the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel. And there, if you're into 80s music, specifically heavy metal right now, there's another group of guys that are doing an ongoing series where they're reviewing their favorite heavy metal hard rock albums of the 1980s. That show is called 80s Mixtape Auto Reverse. Very fun to listen to. Those guys know a lot of deep track stuff around the industry of heavy metal that I had no idea or any inkling. These guys are just uber smart about all that stuff, and they have a lot of fun with the topic. So I encourage you to check them out if you're into that type of thing. So definitely, it should be a must listen for you, even if you're a casual heavy metal hard rock fan.
Good to know.
Yep. So with that, we appreciate you hulking out with us, and you have a good night.
Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.